My name is Elena Ramirez, and for the first 15 years of my life, I believed I had the kind of family people prayed for. We weren't rich, but we were rich in love. Or at least, that's what I thought. We lived in a small, sunny house in Phoenix, Arizona. I was the youngest of three. My brother Mateo was 17, my sister Isabella was 16, and I was the baby, the one everyone spoiled. My parents, Carlos and Maria, had come from Mexico with almost nothing and built a life through pure hard work. Dad worked long hours in construction, and Mom cleaned houses while also working evenings at a local restaurant. Even with their exhaustion, they always made time for us. Our evenings were filled with laughter. Mom would play old Mexican music while cooking, and we'd all dance around the kitchen. Dad would tell stories from his childhood, making us laugh until our stomachs hurt. I felt completely safe. Completely loved. I was a dreamer. While other kids played video games, I was sketching fashion designs in my notebook. I wanted to build my own clothing brand one day. I wanted to give my parents the big house and easy life they deserved. Mija, you have such a big heart, Mom would say, kissing my forehead. The world is going to know your name. I worked hard. Straight A's in school, captain of the debate team, and a part-time job at a boutique after school. I believe that if I kept pushing, our family would rise together. We often talked about the future, moving to a nicer neighborhood, maybe even opening our own small store one day. Those dreams felt so real. Then my parents started talking about Texas. At first, it was casual. There are better opportunities there, Dad would say. Lower taxes, more jobs in construction, a bigger community. I got excited too. I started looking up schools in Austin and Houston, imagining a fresh start for all of us. I even told my best friend we're moving to Texas soon. It's going to be amazing. The night before everything changed, we had a beautiful family dinner. Mom made all my favorites, mole, rice, fresh tortillas, and flan for dessert. We laughed, teased each other, and talked about our dreams. Dad raised his glass and said with tears in his eyes, "To the Ramirez family, no matter where we go, we stay together." I went to bed that night feeling warm and hopeful. I had no idea those words would become the biggest lie of my life. 2 days later, while I was at school, my entire world collapsed. When I came home, the house was strangely quiet. Most of the furniture was still there, but many personal things were missing. My heart started racing. I ran to my parents' room. Their closet was half empty. Panic set in. I called my mom's phone. No answer. My dad's phone went straight to voicemail. That evening, I received a single text message from my mother that would haunt me for years, Mija. We had to leave quickly for Texas. "We'll send for you soon. Be good. We love you." They had moved to Texas without me. At 15 years old, I was left behind, abandoned by the family I loved more than anything in this world. I had no idea that 17 years later, my success would make them come crawling back, broken, desperate, and full of regret. The first few days after they left were the hardest. I stayed in our half-empty house alone, waiting for the phone to ring. Every time it buzzed, my heart would jump. I kept telling myself, they're just settling in. They'll call soon and arrange for me to join them. I cleaned the house every day, did my homework, and went to my part-time job like nothing had changed. I didn't want anyone at school to know what happened. The shame already felt too heavy. On the fourth day, Mom finally called. Her voice sounded tired but cheerful. "Mija, we're so sorry. Everything happened so fast. The job offer was only good if your father started immediately. We're looking for a place big enough for all of us. Just be patient, okay? We'll send for you very soon." I believed her. I had to. She promised they were apartment hunting and would call me every week. Dad even got on the phone and said, "You're our strong girl, Elena. Hold on just a little longer." Those words kept me going. The first warning sign came after 2 weeks. The calls became less frequent. When I asked when I could come to Texas, Mom would sigh and say, "We're still getting settled, mija. Schools here are expensive. We need to save more money first." I offered to get a second job or even drop some activities, but she always changed the subject. Then the excuses started piling up. 1 month turned into 2, then 3. Whenever I pushed harder, Mom would get emotional. "You don't understand how hard it is here, Elena. We're doing this for the family. Don't make it more difficult." I felt guilty for asking. I started thinking maybe I was being selfish for wanting them to hurry. My sister Isabella texted me sometimes, but her messages felt short and distant. Mateo barely replied at all. I told myself they were busy with new schools and new friends. I didn't want to believe they were moving on without me. The biggest red flag came after 4 months. I had saved up $380 from my job and offered to buy my own bus ticket to Texas. Mom's response was strange. She got quiet on the phone, then said, "No, mija, not yet. We're not ready." When I asked why, she snapped at me for the first time in my life. "Stop pressuring us. You think this is easy for us either?" That conversation left me crying in my room for hours. Something felt deeply wrong, but I kept pushing the doubt away. This was my family. They loved me. They wouldn't abandon me. I started living like a ghost in my own house. I kept my grades up, went to work, and waited. Every night I would look at pictures of us together on my phone and whisper, "They're coming back for me soon." But deep down, a small voice was growing louder. Why weren't they sending for me? Why did the excuses keep changing? Why did their new life in Texas seem to be moving forward so easily without me? I had no idea that the truth was far more painful than I could imagine. My family wasn't just delayed in bringing me over, they had made a deliberate choice. And in a few more months, that painful truth would finally be forced into the light. 6 months had passed since my family left for Texas, and the cracks in their promises were turning into deep fractures. The weekly calls had now become monthly, and even those felt forced. Every time I asked about coming to Texas, Mom would sigh dramatically and say the same things. "We're still not settled, mija. The rent here is higher than we thought. Just be patient." Her voice had lost its warmth. It sounded like she was reading from a script. I turned 16 alone. No cake, no family dinner, no phone call until late that night. When Mom finally called, she sounded distracted. "Happy birthday, Elena. We'll celebrate when you get here." I cried myself to sleep that night, holding the necklace my father had given me years ago. Then came the day that made me truly suspicious. I had been saving every penny from my job. I called Mom excited and told her I had enough money for a one-way bus ticket to Houston. I expected joy. Instead, there was a long silence. "Elena, don't come right now," she said sharply. "We have a lot going on. Your father's new job is stressful. Isabella is having problems at school. It's not a good time." That was the moment something inside me shifted. For the first time, I didn't believe her. "Why isn't it a good time?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You said you were making a better life for all of us. Why can't I be with my own family?" Mom got defensive. "You don't understand how hard it is here. Stop being so selfish. We'll send for you when we're ready." Selfish, that word broke me. I had spent 6 months alone, paying the remaining rent on our old house with my part-time job, keeping my grades up, and surviving on instant noodles just so I wouldn't burden them. And I was the selfish one? After that call, the lies became more obvious. My sister Isabella posted pictures on social media almost every day. New house, new friends, family dinners, trips to the beach. In one photo, I saw my old favorite blanket on their couch. They had taken so many things with them, yet they claimed they weren't settled. I started noticing other things too. Dad's Facebook post showed him smiling with new coworkers, talking about their fresh start. None of the posts mentioned me. It was like I had been erased from their new life. The emotional tension kept building inside me. I would replay our old family videos at night, searching for any sign that this was temporary. But the more I looked, the more I saw the truth I had been avoiding. They weren't struggling to bring me over. They had chosen to start over without me. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I called my brother Mateo. He answered, but his voice was cold. "Elena, you need to stop pressuring them," he said. "We all made sacrifices. You're old enough to take care of yourself now." His words felt like a slap. Mateo, who used to protect me from bullies, was now telling me to stop bothering our parents. That conversation destroyed the last bit of trust I had. I realized they weren't delayed. They had made a conscious decision to leave me behind. The betrayal was no longer a fear, it was becoming a reality. I started sleeping less. My grades began to slip. The boutique owner noticed I was distracted and gently asked if everything was okay at home. I lied and said yes, but inside I was falling apart. Then came the most painful discovery so far. While scrolling through Mom's Facebook one sleepless night, I saw a post from 3 months earlier. It was a family photo in front of their new house in Texas, all 4 of them smiling. Underneath, Mom had written, "Finally home." New beginnings for the Ramirez family. They had been living in that house for months. They never planned to send for me. The realization hit me like a truck. My own family had abandoned me at 15 and started a new life without even looking back. But I still didn't know the full truth, because there was something even darker behind their decision, a secret that would be revealed much later. The truth hit me on a cold Tuesday evening, exactly 8 months after they had left. I was sitting on the floor of my nearly empty bedroom, scrolling through my mother's Facebook page like I did almost every night. That's when I saw a post from 6 months earlier that she had forgotten to hide from me. It was a photo of the whole family in front of a beautiful new house in Houston. Mom, Dad, Mateo, and Isabella were all smiling. The caption read, "Finally settled in our dream home. Thank God we made the right decision for our family." New beginnings, but what destroyed me was the comment underneath from my Aunt Rosa, "Glad you finally got rid of the extra burden. Elena was always too much work anyway. You deserve this fresh start." My mother had replied with a heart emoji. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. My hands started shaking so badly I dropped my phone. I sat there on the floor staring at the screen, reading and rereading those words until they burned into my brain. Extra burden. That's what I was to them. I spent the entire night reading through years of messages and old posts. The full picture finally emerged, and it was far uglier than I had imagined. They had been planning the move for over a year. While I was happily talking about our new life in Texas, they were secretly deciding whether to take me or not. My father had apparently told my mother that I was too expensive and that moving with 3 children would be too difficult. My good grades and dreams suddenly became extra stress they didn't want to deal with. The most painful part? My sister Isabella had been the one who suggested leaving me behind. In a group chat I wasn't part of, she wrote, "Elena is old enough to figure it out. She's always been the favorite anyway. Let her stay." They didn't just leave me, they chose to leave me. I threw up that night. The betrayal was so deep, so complete that my body physically rejected it. I lay on the bathroom floor crying until I had no tears left. The family I had loved with my entire heart had looked at me and decided I was not worth taking with them. The next few days were a blur of emotional destruction. I stopped going to school. I quit my job at the boutique. I lay in bed for days, barely eating, replaying every happy memory and realizing they had all been built on lies. Every "I love you," every "we're a team," every promise about our future together, it was all fake. I felt worthless. If my own parents could abandon me so easily, what did that say about me? Was I really that much of a burden? That unlovable? My world collapsed completely. The dreams I had of building a fashion brand and taking care of my family felt stupid now. Everything I had worked for suddenly felt meaningless. I was just a 15-year-old girl, completely alone in an empty house, abandoned by the people who were supposed to love me most. The final blow came when I received an official letter from Child Protective Services. Someone at school had reported that I was living alone. That's when I learned my parents had told the school they had temporary financial issues and would be sending for me soon. They had lied to everyone. In that moment, I stopped being their daughter. I became a survivor. But even in my deepest pain, I had no idea how much worse the full truth actually was. Because there was still one more layer of betrayal I hadn't discovered yet, a secret that would change how I saw my entire family forever. The weeks after discovering the truth were the darkest of my entire life. I stopped pretending everything was okay. I dropped out of school. I lost my job at the boutique because I couldn't show up. I spent most days lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every happy memory with my family, and realizing they had all been fake. The loneliness was suffocating. The house that once felt warm and full of love now felt like a tomb. I would walk from room to room, touching things they left behind: my mother's old apron, my father's favorite coffee mug, Isabella's childhood teddy bear. Every object reminded me that they had chosen to start over without me. I barely ate. I lost so much weight that my clothes hung off my body. Some nights I would sit on the porch and whisper, "Why wasn't I enough?" The pain was so deep it felt physical. My chest constantly hurt. I couldn't sleep without having nightmares about them laughing at me, calling me an extra burden. The self-doubt was relentless. I started believing everything negative they had implied about me. Maybe I really was too much work. Maybe I was difficult to love. Maybe they were happier without me. These thoughts consumed me until I felt completely worthless. Child Protective Services eventually got involved. A social worker came to the house and found me living alone. I was placed in emergency foster care for a few months. The family I stayed with was kind, but I felt like a stranger in their home. I kept thinking even strangers are taking care of me better than my own blood. I lost contact with almost everyone. My best friend Sarah tried to stay in touch, but I pushed her away. I was too ashamed. I didn't want anyone to know my own parents had thrown me away. The lowest point came on my 17th birthday. I sat alone in a small room at the foster house with a single cupcake Sarah had sent me. No calls from my family, no messages, nothing. That night I cried so hard I thought my heart would stop. I felt completely broken, like the girl I used to be had died the day they left for Texas. I started questioning everything about myself. Was I unlovable? Was there something fundamentally wrong with me? The pain was so intense that some nights I didn't want to wake up the next morning. But even in that complete darkness, a tiny spark of anger began to grow underneath the sadness. It was quiet at first, but it was there. A voice that whispered, "They did this to you. They don't get to win." I didn't know it then, but that small spark would eventually become the fire that saved me. Because while I was falling apart in Arizona, my family was building their new life in Texas, completely unaware that one day my success would force them to face the consequences of what they had done. And I was about to discover even darker secrets about why they really left me behind. By the time I turned 17, I thought I had already hit rock bottom. I was wrong. The real truth was still waiting for me, and it was far more devastating than I could have imagined. It started with a letter. I had been moved to a long-term foster home with a kind older couple, Miss and Mrs. Thompson. One afternoon, a thick envelope arrived in the mail addressed to me. Inside was a folder from a private investigator sent anonymously. Someone had been watching my case. What I read inside shattered the last pieces of my heart. The documents showed that my parents had received a significant financial opportunity in Texas, a subsidized housing program, and a signing bonus for my father's job. But there was a catch. The assistance was only for families with 2 or fewer dependent children. They had deliberately left me behind to qualify for more money, better housing, and government support. They had chosen financial gain over their own daughter. But that wasn't even the worst part. Buried deeper in the papers were bank records. Over the years, my parents had been receiving monthly child support payments from the state for me, even though I was living alone in Arizona. They had never sent a single dollar to help me. Instead, they used that money to furnish their new home and take family vacations. I sat on my bed staring at the numbers until they blurred. Thousands of dollars meant for me had gone to them while I was eating ramen and worrying about keeping the electricity on. The biggest twist came in the final pages. My sister Isabella had known everything. In fact, she had helped convince our parents to leave me. In old group chat messages that the investigator had somehow obtained, she wrote, "Elena is too much drama anyway. She'll be fine. We deserve this new life." My own sister, the girl I used to share a room with and tell my secrets to, had helped plan my abandonment. I spent the next 3 days barely speaking. The Thompsons were worried, but I couldn't explain the depth of the pain. I felt stupid, naive, worthless. How could I have loved people so much who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle? But the final revelation, the one that truly broke me, came through a phone call from my Aunt Rosa. She had found out what I discovered and called me in tears. After a long silence, she admitted the darkest secret of all. Your father had been having an affair with a woman in Texas for over a year before the move. That woman was the real reason they moved so suddenly. She didn't want him to bring all 3 children. Your mother knew about the affair and still chose to follow him and leave you behind. Everything finally made sense. The rushed move, the coldness, the lies. My entire family had sacrificed me for my father's new relationship and a better financial situation. I hung up the phone and screamed into my pillow until my throat hurt. The betrayal was complete. Every I love you, every family hug, every promise, it had all been built on deception. In that moment, something inside me finally died. The innocent, hopeful girl who believed in family died on that day. In her place was someone colder, wiser, and filled with a quiet, burning determination. I printed every document. I saved every message. I created a folder labeled The Truth and swore to myself that one day they would have to face what they had done. The pain was still unbearable, but a new emotion was rising stronger than the sadness. Anger, cold, clear, focused anger. I didn't know how or when, but I knew one thing for sure: one day I would make sure they regretted leaving me behind. And that day was coming. After discovering the full truth, I spent nearly 3 months in a fog. But one cold morning in January, something inside me finally shifted. I looked at myself in the mirror, pale, thin, eyes empty, and whispered, "They don't get to win." That was the day I began rebuilding. It wasn't dramatic or quick. It was painful, slow, and exhausting. I started with small things. I forced myself to eat 3 meals a day. I went for walks every morning with music in my ears. I returned to school and begged my teachers for a second chance. To my surprise, most of them showed me grace once they learned what had happened. The Thompsons, my foster parents, became my first real support system. Mrs. Thompson would sit with me at the kitchen table every evening and help me with homework. "You're not what they did to you, Elena," she would say gently. "You're what you choose to become." I started working again, this time at a small fashion boutique. The owner, Miss Carla, saw something in me. She let me sketch designs in my free time and even used some of my ideas for window displays. For the first time since my family left, I felt seen for my talent instead of my burden. Therapy became my lifeline. I went twice a week and slowly unpacked years of pain. I learned that being abandoned didn't make me unlovable, it made my family selfish. That realization was freeing. By the time I turned 18, I had graduated high school with decent grades. I got accepted into a community college with financial aid and started studying business and fashion design. I worked full-time while going to school. Some days I was so tired I cried in the bus on my way home, but I kept going. The anger I felt never disappeared. It transformed into fuel. I created a secret vision board in my notebook. On it, I wrote one sentence: "One day they will search my name and regret everything." That sentence became my obsession. I studied harder than anyone else in my classes. I worked on my designs late into the night. I learned everything I could about branding, marketing, and online business. I started a small Instagram page where I posted my fashion sketches. Slowly, it began to grow. I also changed how I saw myself. I stopped being the abandoned little girl. I became Elena Ramirez, survivor, fighter, and future boss. I cut my hair short. I started dressing with more confidence. I practiced speaking up for myself. One night, after selling my first original dress design to a local boutique for $300, I sat on my bed and cried happy tears. It was the first real win I had earned completely on my own. Daniel, a kind classmate who later became my boyfriend, once asked me why I worked so hard. I looked at him and said quietly, "Because I want the people who threw me away to one day choke on my success." Rebuilding myself wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about becoming undeniable. I had no idea that in a few short years my name would spread far beyond Arizona. My fashion brand would take off online, and my face would appear in magazines, and my family in Texas would eventually search my name and feel the full weight of what they had done. The girl they abandoned was becoming someone they could never ignore again. Success came faster than I expected. By the time I turned 28, my fashion brand Lena Rose had exploded online. What started as late-night sketches had become a growing business with thousands of loyal customers. My designs were being featured in magazines, and I was invited to speak at fashion events. For the first time in my life, I felt powerful. I had built something beautiful from the ashes they left me in, but deep down, I never forgot. I had kept every single document, every screenshot, every painful message from my family. They were stored in a locked folder on my laptop, labeled simply the truth. I told myself I was just being careful, but I knew what I was really doing. I was preparing. The preparation started quietly. I hired a private investigator to quietly check on my family in Texas. What he found confirmed everything. My parents were struggling. Dad's construction business had been unstable for years. Mom had health issues. My brother Mateo was in and out of jobs, and Isabella had 2 kids but a rocky marriage. They had posted on social media about their perfect life, but behind the scenes, they were barely holding on. I didn't feel joy at their struggles. I felt cold determination. I spent months building my case not just emotionally, but legally. I consulted a lawyer who specialized in family abandonment and emotional distress cases. She was shocked by the evidence I had kept for over a decade. "You have something very strong here," she told me. Abandonment, financial fraud regarding child support, and emotional damage. We can go after them if you want. I thought about it for weeks. Part of me wanted to let it go and move on with my life, but another part, the 15-year-old girl who was left behind, needed closure. So I began preparing strategically. I created a professional media kit about my journey. I wrote my story carefully, not as a victim, but as a survivor who turned pain into success. I hired a PR team and started planting small stories about my background in fashion interviews. I wanted my name to spread naturally. At the same time, I made sure my financial success was protected. I bought a beautiful house, set up trusts, and built a team around me. I was no longer the scared girl they abandoned. I was a businesswoman with resources, connections, and proof. The suspense kept building inside me. I would lie awake some nights imagining the moment they would finally search my name. I pictured my mother's face when she realized the daughter she threw away was now successful beyond anything they had achieved. I imagined my father's regret. I wanted them to feel the weight of their choice. Daniel, who had become my husband by then, supported me fully. One night he asked, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I looked at him and said, "I don't want revenge. I want them to understand what they did. I want them to feel it." Everything was falling into place. My brand was about to launch a major collection. A big fashion magazine wanted to do a feature story on me and my journey from abandonment to success. I knew this story would spread, and when it did, my family in Texas would see it. I could feel the moment approaching, the quiet before the storm. They had abandoned a broken 15-year-old girl. They were about to face a powerful woman who had never forgotten. The final confrontation was coming. The first cracks in their world appeared the moment my story went public. A major fashion magazine published a long, emotional feature titled "From Abandoned to Empowered: How Elena Ramirez Built a Fashion Empire." The article detailed my journey being left behind at 15, surviving foster care, and building Lena Rose from nothing. It included old photos of me as a child with my family, and one powerful line, "While her family started over in Texas, Elena started over alone." The article spread like wildfire. Within days, it was shared thousands of times. Fashion influencers picked it up. Local news in Texas ran segments about the local success story with a heartbreaking beginning. My name was everywhere. And then they saw it. The first call came from my sister Isabella. I was in my office when my phone rang with an unknown Texas number. Something told me not to ignore it. When I answered, I heard her voice older, shakier than I remembered. "Elena, is this really you?" I stayed silent for a moment, then replied calmly, "Yes, Isabella, it's me." She broke down almost immediately. "We saw the article. Mom and Dad, they're not doing well. They've been crying for days. Is it true? Did they really leave you behind like that?" I felt a strange calmness wash over me. "Yes, every word is true." The call lasted only a few minutes, but it was the beginning of their fall. Isabella kept apologizing, saying she was young and stupid back then. I listened without offering comfort. I had waited 13 years for this moment. 2 days later, my mother called. Her voice was weak and full of tears. "Mija, please, we need to talk. We made a terrible mistake. We were selfish. We were struggling, and we thought I cut her off gently but firmly. You thought I was an extra burden. You chose money and a new life over your own daughter. There's nothing left to talk about." She cried harder. "We've been watching your success. You did so well, Elena. We're so proud of you, but we're also so ashamed." Proud, the word almost made me laugh. Where was that pride when I was 16, eating instant noodles alone in an empty house? My father called next. His voice was hoarse. He didn't make excuses. He just said, "I failed you, Mija. I failed as a father. I don't know how to fix this." For the first time in 17 years, I heard real regret in his voice, not the kind that comes from being caught, but deep, heavy regret. Their perfect life in Texas was crumbling. People in their community had seen the article. Some neighbors started asking questions. Old friends distanced themselves. My success had exposed their abandonment in the worst possible way. I didn't gloat. I didn't insult them. I simply told each of them the same thing. You made your choice 17 years ago. Now you have to live with it. Watching them slowly lose control felt like justice, but not the final one. They were only beginning to understand the consequences of what they had done. The first fall had begun. But the biggest confrontation was still coming when I would finally stand before them face to face. The call that changed everything came on a quiet Thursday afternoon. It was my mother. Her voice was trembling so badly I could barely understand her at first. "Elena, please, we need to see you, all of us. We're begging you, just one meeting." 17 years of pain rose up in my chest. I was silent for a long moment before answering, "I'll come to Texas, but on my terms. One meeting." No excuses, no lies. 2 weeks later, I flew to Houston. I rented a luxury car and drove to the upscale restaurant my mother had chosen. When I walked in, they were already seated at a large round table. The moment they saw me, the entire table went silent. I was no longer the broken 15-year-old girl they had abandoned. I was a successful 32-year-old woman in an elegant designer dress carrying a $12 handbag with the quiet confidence of someone who had rebuilt herself from nothing. My mother's eyes filled with tears. My father looked like he had aged 20 years. Isabella couldn't meet my eyes. Mateo stared at the table. Only my brother looked somewhat composed, but even he seemed nervous. I sat down without hugging anyone. For the first few minutes, no one spoke. Then my father cleared his throat, his voice cracking. Elena, we don't even know where to begin. We were selfish. We were wrong. We abandoned you when you needed us most. I failed as a father. I have no excuse. My mother reached for my hand, but I gently pulled it back. We saw what you've built, she whispered. Your success, your brand. We're so proud of you. But we're also destroyed by what we did. Isabella started crying. I was young and stupid. I thought if we had fewer kids, it would be easier. I'm so sorry, Elena. I looked at each of them slowly, letting the silence stretch. Then I spoke calmly, but every word carried the weight of 17 years. You didn't just leave me. You chose to leave me. You took money meant for me. You lied to everyone. You called me a burden. You started a new life and erased me like I never existed. Do you have any idea what that does to a 15-year-old girl? Tears were falling freely now. My father looked broken. We regret it every single day. We've been watching you from afar, seeing your success, and it kills us knowing we missed everything. I pulled out a folder from my bag, the same folder I had kept for years. I placed it on the table. Everything is in here. The messages, the bank records, the proof that you claimed child support while I was struggling alone. I'm not here for money. I'm here so you finally understand what you did. The emotional showdown reached its peak when my mother fell to her knees beside the table, sobbing openly in the middle of the restaurant. Please forgive us, Mija. We don't deserve it, but we're begging you. I looked down at the woman who once sang me to sleep and felt both pity and peace. I forgive you, I said quietly, not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry your guilt for the rest of my life. However, forgiveness doesn't mean I want you back in my life. Some doors, once closed, should stay closed. My father nodded, tears streaming down his face. We understand. As I stood up to leave, Isabella asked one last question, her voice small. Do you hate us? I looked at all of them one final time. I don't hate you. I'm just no longer defined by you. I walked out of that restaurant with my head high. The final confrontation was over. The truth had finally been laid bare in front of the people who had tried to erase me. For the first time in 17 years, I felt completely free. The months after that emotional meeting in Houston brought a strange but powerful sense of justice, not loud or vengeful, but quiet and undeniable. My family finally began to feel the full weight of their choices. My father's health declined rapidly after our meeting. The guilt seemed to break something inside him. He had to retire early from his construction job. I heard through distant relatives that he spent most days sitting on the porch, staring into the distance, often whispering my name with regret. My mother's calls became more frequent at first, filled with apologies and attempts to rebuild. But I kept firm boundaries. I answered occasionally, but never for long. She started going to therapy, something she had never done before. She told me once, I wake up every day knowing I abandoned my daughter. That guilt never leaves me. Isabella's marriage fell apart. Her husband left after learning the full story of how she had encouraged our parents to leave me behind. She reached out asking for financial help, but I gently refused. I told her I would pray for her healing, but I could not be her safety net. The sister who once called me a burden now had to face life's consequences on her own. Mateo was the only one who seemed to make some positive changes. He got a stable job and sent me a long letter apologizing. I accepted his apology but kept the relationship distant. Some wounds run too deep for quick fixes. On my end, justice felt like freedom. My brand, Lena Rose, continued to grow. We launched a new collection inspired by resilience and rebirth. In interviews, I began speaking more openly about my journey, not for sympathy, but to show other abandoned children that they could rise. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of messages poured in from people who related to my story. I bought my dream house, a beautiful modern home with a big studio for designing. I got married to Daniel in a small, joyful ceremony surrounded by chosen family and true friends. The Thompsons, my foster parents, walked me down the aisle. Chief Carla from the boutique became like a second mother to me. The sweetest form of justice came when I least expected it. One afternoon, I received a package from Texas. Inside was a letter from my father and a small wooden box. In the letter he wrote, "Elena, I know I can never make up for what we did, but I want you to have this. It's the only valuable thing I have left, the watch my father gave me when I became a man. I was supposed to give it to you on your 18th birthday. I failed. Please take it now. I'm proud of the woman you became without us." I held that old watch in my hands and cried, not from sadness, but from release. The man who had abandoned me was finally acknowledging my worth. I didn't send anything back. I didn't need to. I had already won. Justice wasn't about destroying them. It was about them finally seeing the consequences of their actions while I built a beautiful life they would never be fully part of. I finally felt free. The girl they threw away at 15 had become a woman who no longer needed their love to feel complete. 10 years have passed since that emotional meeting in Houston, and today my life feels like a beautiful dream I once didn't dare to believe in. I'm 39 years old now. I wake up every morning in a sunlit home surrounded by love. Daniel and I have 2 beautiful children, a 6-year-old daughter named Sophia and a 4-year-old son named Lucas. They fill our house with laughter, drawings on the fridge, and endless questions about the world. Watching them grow has been the greatest healing of all. My fashion brand, Lena Rose, is now a well-known name in sustainable and empowering women's clothing. We have a small but thriving team, and I make sure every employee feels valued and respected, something I never received from my own family. Every time a young girl tells me my story inspired her to keep going, I feel like the pain I went through finally had meaning. I have a healthy, chosen family now. The Thompsons are still in my life, and they adore being grandparents to my children. I have close friends who became sisters. I even reconnected with my old best friend, Sarah, and our friendship is stronger than ever. As for my biological family in Texas, the relationship remains limited and carefully guarded. I speak to my mother a few times a year. She has changed. She goes to therapy regularly and has become much more humble. My father's health is stable, but he carries deep regret that I can see in his eyes whenever we meet. Isabella and Mateo are doing better, but we are not close. I send birthday gifts to their children, but I protect my peace fiercely. Some bridges were burned too completely to fully rebuild. I've learned that healing doesn't always mean full reconciliation. Sometimes healing means knowing when to keep a healthy distance while still wishing someone well from afar. The greatest lesson I've learned is this: family is not just who gives birth to you. Family is who chooses to stay when things get hard. Family is who sees your worth even when you have nothing to give. Today, I no longer carry the weight of being abandoned. That 15-year-old girl who cried alone in an empty house feels like a distant memory. In her place stands a strong, successful, loving woman who knows her value. I often sit on my porch in the evenings watching my children play, and I feel overwhelming gratitude. The path was painful, but it led me here to a life I built with my own hands, heart, and resilience. They moved to Texas without me at 15. 17 years later, my success made them regret everything. But the most beautiful part? I no longer need their regret to feel whole. I am finally free. If you've stayed with me until the end, thank you. To anyone listening who has ever been abandoned, betrayed, or made to feel like a burden, especially by your own family, I want you to hear this. Your worth was never dependent on their love. Your future was never limited by their rejection. And your story does not end with their betrayal. You can survive. You can heal. You can rise so high that the people who left you behind will one day search your name and feel the full weight of what they lost. The greatest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living a beautiful, peaceful, successful life despite everything they did to break you. I'm Elena Ramirez. They left me at 15. But I found myself and I built a life they could never take away. Thank you for listening to my story. Wherever you are, keep going. Your comeback is coming.